war is a terrible thing. It brings death, destruction, and suffering. But sometimes, war may be necessary to protect innocent people or to uphold justice. The philosophy of just war is an attempt to reconcile the moral imperative to avoid war with the necessary use of force at times. The question behind just war theory is how to balance the inherent violence and destruction of war with the moral principles of justice and peace. It is used as a framework for evaluating the morality of war, and it has been used to justify or condemn wars throughout history. Just war theory, sometimes abbreviated to JWT, has two main branches: jus ad bellum, which deals with the justice of going to war, and jus in bello, which deals with the justice of conduct in war. Let's first discuss jus ad bellum, the morally valid reasons for going to war. The first reason is having a just cause. There must be a morally justifiable reason for going to war, such as self-defense, defense of others, or prevention of a greater evil. Of course, as we have seen in recent conflicts, one country's just cause may not be viewed as valid by other nations. Another just cause to initiate war is having legitimate authority. To pass this test, the war must be declared by a legitimate authority, such as a government or a coalition of governments. However, there has been a long history of rebellions initiating a war without meeting this criteria, usually because they viewed their cause as just. Next, the war must be fought with the right intention, which is to achieve a just cause without causing significant harm to innocent people. As we know, even a war fought with the right intentions will still inevitably cause harm to the innocent. A just war should only be initiated as a last resort. This means that all peaceful means of resolving the conflict equitably and ethically must have been exhausted before resorting to war. There also should be a reasonable chance of success in achieving the just cause. Of course, this doesn't stop some national leaders from taking a Leroy Jenkins approach. Lastly, proportionality should be considered. This means that the expected good that will come from the war must outweigh the expected harm. However, there is often a disconnect between the expected good for those who start a war and those who have to carry out their orders. Now we will discuss, jus in bello, how a just war is conducted. One principle is that only combatants may be targeted and civilians must be protected. Although, modern wars, from the US Civil War until more recent so-called police actions, have generally ignored the concept to some degree. Civilians often find themselves in the crossfire and become collateral damage. Next, there's proportionality. This idea states that the amount of force used must be proportionate to the goal being achieved. This, however, can be opposed to effective military strategies like shock and awe. Military necessity should be the reason for an attack. Force must only be used to achieve a military objective, not as a means of reprisal. Unfortunately, taking retribution is common, especially when military leadership is weak or looks the other way. Lastly, JWT should permit humane treatment of non-combatants and the injured even if they are the enemy. Sadly, what we have seen in many wars is this idea being ignored to some degree. The idea of just war theory has been criticized in several ways. For example, as I've noted, often what idea says should be done doesn't match what actually happens. Some say it is too idealistic and is unable to account for the complexities of war, especially modern warfare. Others say that no war can truly be just in an idealistic sense. Still others say that it has only been used to justify the victors and condemn the losers in wars throughout history. Despite these criticisms, the just war theory remains an important framework for thinking about the ethics of war. It provides a set of principles that might help us to evaluate whether a particular war is justified or, better yet, avoid war entirely. It also has the purpose of ensuring that wars are fought in a way that minimizes harm to innocent people. What is the history of the philosophy of a just war? JWT, even though flawed, has been used to provide a moral framework for war since ancient times. Over the centuries, philosophers, theologians, and legal scholars have debated the criteria that must be met for a war to be considered just. The theory has its roots in ancient Greece and Rome. The Greek philosopher Aristotle argued that war was justified only in self-defense or to protect the innocent. The Roman statesman Cicero also argued that war should be a last resort and that it should be fought in a just and humane manner. It was further developed by Christian thinkers in the Middle Ages. The theologian St. Augustine argued that war could be justified to protect the innocent and to punish evildoers. The philosopher St. Thomas Aquinas further refined the JWT by adding the criteria of right intention. The just war theory continued to be refined by philosophers and theologians in the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. One of the most important figures in this tradition was Hugo Grotius, who argued that the laws of war apply to all states, regardless of their religious beliefs. In the 17th century, Spanish philosopher Francisco de Vitoria put forth the idea that war could only be justified if it was fought by a legitimate authority, if it had a just cause, and if it was fought in a just way. He also argued that war should be avoided whenever possible, and that it should be fought only as a means of last resort. The JWT was also influential in the development of international law. The 1648 Peace of Westphalia, which ended the 30 Years' War, prohibited the use of force to change borders or to interfere in the internal affairs of other states. This principle was later enshrined in the United Nations Charter. The just war theory has continued to evolve in the modern era. In the 20th century, for example, the theory was used to justify the Allied intervention in World War II. However, the theory has also been criticized for being used to justify wars that have been seen as unjust, such as the Vietnam War. In recent years, there has been a renewed interest in the just war theory, due in part to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Some people have argued that these wars were not justified under the just war theory, while others have argued that they were justified under the circumstances at that time. Some modern-era philosophers, such as Michael Waltze, have argued that the JWT is still relevant in the 21st century, but that it needs to be adapted to the new realities of warfare. Others, such as Jean Bethke Elshtain, have argued that the JWT is too idealistic and that it cannot account for the real-world complexities of modern warfare. Others argue that the theory is too flexible and that it can be used to justify wars that are not truly just. There is no easy answer to the question of when war is justified. JWT does provide a set of principles, even if imperfect and biased at times, that can be used to assess the morality of a particular war. They can help us to make more informed decisions about the use of force. National leaders can decide to follow them or to ignore them to achieve their political objectives at their own peril. Further, it should remind us that war is a serious matter that should not be undertaken lightly because of the great harm it can cause a vast number of people. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like if you enjoyed this video and feel free to comment to let us know your thoughts on it. Also, check out our other study review videos on other philosophers and philosophies.